This reflection is based on Mark chapter 12, verses 38 to 44. In this section, Jesus was teaching a large crowd, and one of the things he said to them was, "Watch out for the scribes." And then he began to describe them. He says they wear long robes. Well, nothing wrong with wearing a long robe, but what he was referring to was the prayer shawl that the people would wear, and this prayer shawl had tassels on it as a reminder to the people that of God's commandments. They were there to remind them. But these scribes used to have great long ones that went right down to the ground as a sort of an indication of just how pious they were. And then it says here they liked the greeting in the marketplace. What would happen was, if they were in the market and there's a storeholder who was sitting down, he would stand and sort of acknowledge the scribe as they went past. They liked that. And it says they also liked the places of honour in the synagogue. Now in the synagogue, most people would sit on the floor, on the ground. But there were some seats up the front which were facing the congregation, and this is where the scribes liked to sit, so they could be seen by everybody. Also, if there were a banquet, they liked the place of honour. They wanted to be up on the head table. So obviously they thought that status was very important to them. But then Jesus went on to say what they do, and he says they devour widows' houses. Now, women in those days had no status. They either belonged to their father, or when they married, they belonged to their husband. And if their husband died, then some male relative may take them in, but often that didn't happen. But if there was no male relative, then the poor woman was nothing and she was just left to beg. So they were a very vulnerable part of society. So much so that in the commandments, God says you are to care for the widows and the orphans, the people who are vulnerable. And what Jesus is saying about these religious leaders, they like themselves to be seen so full of importance, but they were not only failing to care for the vulnerable, they were actually exploiting them. The word that says devour widows' houses, the word used means to gobble up, which is a word which shows greed. If you gobble something up, it's greed. And so what he's saying is that obviously they were just greedy and uncaring of the people they were supposed to care for. It is very easy to exploit the vulnerable, and we see it today in these love scams. Someone in a computer somewhere finds a lady or a man who's lonely and looking for love, and so they send them these emails about how much they love them, and they'll come and they'll marry them and they'll pamper them for life and so on. And the only problem is that they're stuck in the country they're in, or there's some problem and they need money. And so these people send them money, and you hear stories of hundreds of thousands of dollars being sent, even selling their house so that they can send this person money. We see these scammers as just scum of the earth, really, low life. And that's what Jesus is saying about these scribes. He says they're low life. They're putting on all these airs and graces, but they're low life. And in fact, he says they try to cover it up by these long-winded prayers, so that again they can look very pious and holy. And what Jesus said is these men will be punished severely, because God does not look at outward appearances. He looks at what's in the heart. And this is a challenge to us. Do we put on an outward show so that people will think well of us? Whereas in our heart we're greedy, dishonest, all those sorts of things that we want to cover up and hide. God's not fooled. I found a saying on the internet one time which said, putting on a show for God is like getting dressed up for an X-ray. Then the passage turns to Jesus watching people put money in the temple treasury. Now these were their offerings. They would bring them and put them in this container. And in the court of women, which was one of the outer courts of the temple, there were 6 brass trumpet-shaped things that they would put the money in. And it had a wide opening, but then it narrowed down, and then that narrowed down part led into a box below. What this meant was, because they didn't have notes, what this meant was that as coins went in, you could hear it. And the narrow part would stop the flow of coins so they didn't all land in the box in one dump. you would hear them trickling through. And so the longer the sound of the trickling coins, obviously, the more money was being put in. And so Jesus was watching this happen, and he saw people putting in a lot of money. And then he saw this lady come along, a widow, and she had 2 little coins. And the coins were probably worth about 2 cents. And they were absolutely no value to the temple, really. They wouldn't buy anything. But it was all that she had. And Jesus pointed her out to the disciples. All the others have given out of their wealth, out of their abundance. They've given what's left over, what they can spare. But she put in everything that she actually owned. So in fact, she was trusting God that her next meal, well, had to come from God because she didn't have anything to buy anything with. Here's a contrast with the religious leaders. They were the ones with the status and the power, but they were inwardly selfish. They were being hypocrites. The widow, on the other hand, probably hoped that nobody saw how much she put in. In fact, the 2 coins wouldn't have even made a sound as they fell in. But she did it from her heart, and she put her trust in God. And God, in the person of Jesus, was watching, and he commended her. It's not about money. It's all about what's in our hearts. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. That's everything. And then love your neighbour as you love yourself. And these are the 2 greatest commandments.
Change my